So my name's Barry Mears. I am currently in my second year at the University of Glasgow studying primary education. When I was in the SWAP course, I went to Springburn College.
Hi, I'm Annie. I went to SWAP in Springburn as well, and I'm Barry a year later. I'm in first year of primary education at Glasgow Uni.
I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of reading to do on any humanities course, like so much reading, and you can easily, it can be intimidating and overwhelming. But I think for me, if I'm reading a paper, like the abstract and then the conclusion helps so much, because essentially the abstract lays out what it's going to say and why they're doing it, and then the conclusion tells you what they've found.
Yeah.
And if from those two things, if you think they're relevant, you can then go on to further read the paper. Rather than having to read like 20 pages of paper to get to the end. Yeah. And I don't know how you found, Annie, but like most of the chapters I've been reading, there's a summary at the end.
Yes.
I only found this out. I only found this out after reading through the whole chapter, of course.
Yeah.
But they're actually really good for giving you, again, an idea of the key points. And then if there's something that you're interested in, or there's something that you want to or need more explanation on, you can then go back into that chapter and look at it in further detail, which I find really useful.
It's a difficult thing though, because you can get too interested and kill far too many hours just reading up on things because you just want to know.
I know.
And it has no relevance to what you're trying to achieve, but you know what, you just want to know and you just keep going and suddenly it's 4 hours later.
That's far too easy to do.
Yeah, it's terrible. I've been known to just get completely distracted reading up on things that have no great relevance to what I'm actually trying to do. It's terrible. There's enough reading without adding on the extra for yourself.
Yep, there is genuinely enough reading to do that. Also, like I think almost making time for reading is really important as well. Like I think, like I do it on a train. So if I'm going somewhere on a train and I know I'm going to be a while, then you just take some reading, because that's essentially, because you remove yourself from like your usual study space, all you have to focus on essentially is your reading, which is quite nice. So I like loads of train journeys have helped me to like a lot of it reading.
Now, I found especially, I don't know if you did theology or what's the point in first year.
What's the point? Yeah.
That was all reading.
Yeah.
It was basically the entire course was just all reading.
All of it. And like I think that not to scare you some more, but the second year version of What's the Point is just called What If? And it's essentially again an online course that you access yourself, and there's so much reading for that. So I think with digital advances, the reading is more. And there's a lot more autonomy for you to kind of go and access that reading.
Oh yeah. I've never found anything, whether it be a reading that's been given to me or something I want to read for doing an assessment, that you can't access online at the library. It's incredible. It's absolutely
done a really,
incredible.
really good job of that. There's so much stuff available on libraries.
I actually don't take notes when I'm reading, but because I actually do all my reading, I've got all the books on my iPad as PDFs. I don't specifically take notes on it. I highlight as I go. So no, taking notes on reading, I don't. There's been a few classes where we've had to do jigsaw reading and we've had to take notes that are concise enough for other people to understand, which was painful. Didn't love that. It really
is. So yeah, I did that again in second year. Like you still do it. So jigsaw reading tasks are essentially, if you're in a group of 5, you'll each get given like an individual paper or just part of a paper to read, and then you come together to summarize it in a whole. But taking notes for other people is so difficult.
It's nerve-wracking actually. Because it's a strange thing. My notes, I don't think if I gave them to anyone else, just in general, I think they'd look at them and not really greatly grasp where I'm going. But no, while I'm reading, I don't greatly take notes. I'm very much a highlighter.
Yeah, like I know some people may say this is sacrilege, but like using the PDFs to highlight is great. But also, if you get a physical book, don't be scared just to highlight a book. I know it is like before I started the course, I never would have done this. But now that I'm on the course, like it's so much easier just to highlight a certain section or
Yeah.
paragraph,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can go back to it and go, okay, that's what I wanted, because you're not going to just be reading one book for one essay. You're going to be reading like 4 or 5 plus papers, so you can't go back through it all.
No, and I find it a much more efficient use of time as well, just to highlight things, and then if I go back and it is useful later, then I think my biggest tip for how I use sources is reference as I go, because I made that mistake at SWAP, where you get to the end and you have no reference list.
Yeah, 100%.
That is painful. That's certainly.
You're going to be going through so many sources at uni, and I think you'd 100% have to source as you go. Like, just make that reference. Like, if you open up a book, you just make the reference first. If you don't need it, it's much easier to delete it. And also, there's reference guidelines, so always follow them, because you may have a standard way to do it, but there's small tweaks. Like, I don't know if you found this, Annie.
I didn't actually notice that until my first assessment went in, because I thought it's Harvard referencing. It's the same. It's not exactly the same.
And
it's
like, usually
very similar.
Like, usually every college will kind of have the same. So like, education will have the same, or like, but even within education, like, for me, I think last year I realized that fundamentals and education and practice, slightly different referencing style, just small changes. And I think it's literally like punctuation and where they have capitals and things like that. But it is,
things. And page numbers for quotes, that was one that
that was a new one.
Yeah, never used that in SWAP, page numbers and quotes, but certainly my biggest thing for using your sources is reference as you go.
Yeah.
It's painful. But it's not, I think, especially at uni, it's been so much easier to find reliable sources, because the library has every bit of information you could ever need on whatever essay you're writing for whatever class. It's incredible. Yeah. I think it's a difficult thing as well. Sometimes you can look at too many sources. For my first essay was it 1,500 words? It wasn't like much of an essay, really. I think I ended up with 14 sources. It was like, this is just, you can go overboard. I think you need to stop and think, do I have enough information? And I certainly made that mistake, not even just with regards to assessments. At the start, I found it so interesting that I spent hours reading about it.
Yeah.
Like, far more information than I needed to when I had other work that needed to be done. It's so easy to skip down a rabbit hole of, I want to know more about this.
One thing that I'll kind of add to that is that the word count is a lot smaller than I was expecting. So like, even still in second year, like, one of the essays I wrote was 1,000 words essay, but you have to cover a lot of information in that. So when it comes to reading, I think you can overread. The difficulty is you kind of have to essentially have a clear argument. So if you have that clear structure in your essay to start off with, and you have a clear argument from the beginning, then reading to support your argument becomes a little bit easier.
Yeah.
But again, it's unfortunately, like, it takes practice, and you do kind of need to make some mistakes along the way before.
Yeah, I don't think I've reached the level of succinct I need to be yet to get to the amount of information I need in 1,000 words, 1,500 words, especially coming out of SWAP, because there wasn't really word counts. You just kind of wrote until you were done. Yeah. Whereas the word counts are very, very specific with their plus or minus 10%. They're very, very stringent. And
essentially, if you go over that, then like that's you automatically step down a grade.
Yeah.
So like,
my last essay is right on plus 10%. It's exactly the amount of words I was allowed. And I ended up handing it in because I was like, I have no words left. I literally cannot do anything else. This is just going to have to go. And it's, but you can certainly and I think, especially because it's difficult because you do need to do a lot of reading because there's so much information you need to fit in. But it's such a low word count that at the same time, you just don't have space for any irrelevant information whatsoever.
Yeah, that's really true. And I think you also find ways of making your points and using sources a lot more succincter. So rather than, I don't even think that's a word, more succincter, but
succinctly.
It is. Succinctly, thank you. succinctly. I like that. So yeah, you'll find ways of making your points with the use of sources. Like I used to say things like Cohen et al. 2010 said this, rather than just saying it and then having a citation.
Yeah.
And I know it's actually like maybe 4 or 5 words. But that 4 or 5 word reduction makes such a massive difference.